Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and is basking in not one, but two unexpected away victories at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. So both of us quite smug, one of us still quite hungover. I'm Kevin Day, he's Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, laughing like that because he's the one who's not hungover. Good day out, Kieran and Wolves?
It was a wonderful day out. Again, away day pubs. We went into one, and the food there, it was beef stew and bread, and that's what I want on a menu: beef stew and bread. And it was absolutely gorgeous. And the Wolves fans were fantastic. Friendly, gregarious, taking the mickey out of us, and vice versa. Yeah, and the weather was sunny, and we put in a performance as well. So, yeah, perfect day out.
Yeah, last time I was in Wolverhampton a couple of seasons ago, we went into a pub. There's security on the door. We said, all right, away fans, fine? Yeah, he said, yeah, just don't take the piss. And 10 minutes later, he was tapping my mate on the shoulder saying, what did I say about not taking a piss? Because he was trying to get served by waving a 20 quid note over towards the bar, saying, come on, love. It's proper cash money here. One of the very many reasons why fans outside London don't like London football fans. It's Questions Day, Kieran. I just realised I said you have a nice day in Wolves. The place is called Wolverhampton, isn't it? So it's Questions Day, Kieran. But we do have a big news story, and that relates to Chelsea, because it looked like we had a winner in the Chelsea owners race, but now we have a dark horse coming up on the rails.
Yeah, we've got a bit of a one-of-one taking place here. Google that. Unless you're a Tory MP, you might mistake it for. You might end up on a different website in error, of course.
Oh no, to be fair, you might end up on the Tractor website first.
That's right.
Before you accidentally find it. How you can go from Tractors? We've all made that mistake, Kieran, haven't we?
Exactly. Let's not mock.
Which of us hasn't been researching Tractors and found ourselves on a eye-wateringly hardcore porn site? But as you say, let's not mock, Kieran, but for the grace of God.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's the word on the street, and this has been revealed by quite a few journalists, is that the Ted Bowley bid has been the one which is preferred, and I think we'd said that was the one that caused the least problems, because the two other bids would both involve some of the owners selling existing stakes in football clubs, including your guys at Palace.
Indeed.
And also the Pagliuca owns 55% of Atalanta. So this was the least complicated bid. The vibes I'm picking up is that they were broadly of the same amount, and everybody said, "Okay, right, we will have to get used to Ted Bowley and what has he got to say," and a lot of interest. And then from nowhere comes a revelation from Jim Ratcliffe, the richest man in the country, who owns Ineos, the very, very successful industrial and chemicals company. And he says, this is a British bid for a British club, and it's not £2.5 billion, it's £4.25 billion. And people go, hold on, Jim. You said a couple of years ago that there's a mug who is willing to pay $2 billion for Chelsea, and I'm not that mug. So we're going, well, yeah, where on earth has this come from? And he's now sort of saying, well, yeah, I'm nearly 70 years old. I've got enough money to shake out the tree. I might as well go. I want to spend it. I do like Chelsea, although he used to be a Manchester United fan. So I think it's a touch of the David Mellors about him there. In that, yeah, we couldn't support another club. Yeah, that bit of it I don't get, but he's born in Oldham as well. So why are you supporting Chelsea if you're born in Oldham? This figure of 4.25 billion came out, and then that does really blow it out to the water. Then let's take a look at it in a bit more detail, and it turns out that the bid is 2.5 billion, and he's promising to spend another 1.75 bill over the course of the next decade or so in relation to infrastructure, i.e. doing something with Stamford Bridge, which we keep going on about, and also investing in the team. And I think Bowley had said, well, we're going to spend at least $1 billion. So I think that there's not a huge amount of difference in relation to the bids in terms of a monetary perspective. The Bowley team, they have sort of been through the beauty parade. I think they've spoken to Chelsea pitch owners. They've spoken to the Chelsea Supporters Trust to try to get them on board in terms of, look, we're good guys. We're not committing to there's no chance of another Super League taking place, and we'll commit to all of the things that the fans want in terms of protection and sustainability of Chelsea Football Club, which is the right thing to do. It looks as if the Jim Ratcliffe bid has completely bypassed them, not spoken to any of the fan groups, and that they have gone directly to the club as opposed to Rain, who are the bankers. So it's a slight complication. It's a slight fly in the ointment, shall we say? But I still think that Bowley are going to be the preferred bidders because they've gone through the right process. But in business, you never say never until the contract's signed.
Yeah, two things here, Kieran. First of all, to avoid tweets, there is a Ted Bowley, but I believe we're talking about Todd Bowley, aren't we?
Oh yes, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. I'm thinking there's another Ted in American football.
Yes, we are coming on to another Ted in American football, and trust me, it's the last time we're going to be talking about that particular Ted in American football. But the secondly, Kieran, I'm slightly confused as to why this Jim Ratcliffe bid is even being allowed. Because I mean, technically, if he's made the bid to the club, he's made it to Abramovich. Essentially, why would he be allowed, even if he's sort of doubling the money involved? Why would he be allowed to bid outside the normal process? It seems to make a mockery of the process that was set up to come up with a preferred bidder. That someone can just turn up at the last minute and say, right here, I'm doubling the bid. I'm going straight to the club and making the offer to them. Because surely, the government and the Rain Bank would be unhappy about this, would they?
I don't think Rain will be over impressed. I think the government's quite relaxed on it because what's going to happen is they are effectively the backstop in all of this. So they say, you go through all the normal process, the Premier League go through the process in terms of satisfying the owners and directors test, and then we've got the final yes or no in the sense that we can block the bid, as can Abramovich. Because ultimately, these are his shares. Remember, these are shares which are owned by Roman Abramovich in his company. The government has frozen them. It has not nationalised them. They've not taken possession without compensation. Now, what the government has said, and we can all understand where they're coming from here, the proceeds should not be going to Roman Abramovich. Yeah. There's another complication in that late last week, Abramovich said, oh, by the way, I want another 500 million quid in respect of the bid. And people go, what? Where's this come from? He said, oh, yeah, it's for charity bids. And then we're starting to sort of delve into things a little bit more. And originally, Abramovich had said that he was not going to take any money in respect of the loans. But this was before the sanctions were started. And again, sort of noises I'm picking up from some people. He's now saying, well, because you put sanctions on me, I do want my loan back. So it's messy. And this is what we've said from all time. There has to be transparency. There's got to be an awful lot of scrutiny of this because, he bought the club for 140 million quid, but nobody wants him walking away with any of the proceeds, given his connections to Putin.
I suppose as well, one last thing, from the government's perspective, they would be quite happy for an English takeover, wouldn't they, of Chelsea, I would guess, or a British one at least.
Yes, yeah. It would. I think it would dilute the number of American owners because I think there has been a bit of concern that there's sort of 8, it could be 9 of them soon, having direct or indirect involvement. And then you start to reach that critical mass where could they collectively start to do things which are in the best interests of owners who are, should we say, not necessarily football fans, but who are investors first and foremost. And that goes completely against the grain of everything that the fan-led review stands for, and everything that I think football fans in this country stand for.
Yeah, I also wonder what the atmosphere is going to be like in the boardroom at Selhurst Park for the next game when the Americans turn up and Steve Parish went, "Oh yeah, all right lads, how did the bid for the other club go?" Because that was the scenario that we'd seen, that Harris and Blitzer would buy, or Harris would buy Chelsea, and then Textor would take over at Palace. So again, it complicates issues at Palace as well as Chelsea. Questions, Kieran, and as you hinted, the first question is about Ted. It comes from RJ Viverberg. Thank you for this question, RJ. You may not be aware of the circumstances, but RJ says, I have a light-hearted question. I'll be the judge.
Well, it's not going to be answered in a light-hearted way, is it?
I have a light-hearted question to warm up your listeners just before you dive into the more hardcore questions about amortization. Apple TV Plus airs a very successful, quite successful, I think you'll find, and in terms of viewing figures, middling.
It could have been more successful. I think they've got some of the cast.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. About a clueless American football coach called Ted Lasso managing a fictional Premier League club called AFC Richmond. Why did the producers decide to go for a fictional London football club and not, for example, choose an actual London football club, such as, may I dare say so, Kevin, Crystal Palace? The kit colours are, after all, identical. Would that have triggered some sort of fee discussion with Crystal Palace for the use of the name? And on the other hand, with all these American owners in the Premier League, including at Palace, of course, the owners could have also seen this as free publicity for their football team in the attractive American market. What happened here? This is I'm putting a moratorium now on Ted Lasso questions after this. Kieran, you can answer this one quite freely. The cat has just walked into the office, so I'm going to stroke her for a couple of minutes, and I'll make a guess as to when you finished, because just in case new listeners don't know, the reason I don't like Ted Lasso is because I was turned down for playing the part of myself. I was offered a cameo role playing what I used to do on Match of the Day 2, and then somebody else ended up playing me instead. But yes, it's an interesting question. It's clearly meant to be, well, it's not meant to be Palace, but it's clearly Selhurst Park and it's clearly Palace's kit. So why didn't they just not call it Palace in the first place?
Well, I think first of all, the success of Ted Lasso is unexpected. So they started off with a budget, and if they had wanted to use the name of Crystal Palace Football Club, then the intellectual property owned by Palace would come into play, and they would have to pay a fee for that. If they set up a fictional club called AFC Richmond, there's no fee. So there's an initial cost savings. Secondly, there would be issues, I think, from Palace's perspective, because Palace have existing front of shirt sponsors, arm sleeve sponsors, and so on. And they say, well, hold on, what's happening here? Because if AFC Richmond have got the name of a different firm of sponsors on their shirts, isn't this taking away from our financial commitment to Palace on an annual basis? And they might have felt unhappy with regards to that. And thirdly, it might have made Steve Parish feel slightly uneasy because it is a fictional. It is a very sort of American sort of twee, sort of family style show. But there are elements of what we might refer to as fruitiness on it, and that fruitiness might have gone against the values of Crystal Palace itself, and it could be that the show might have dealt with issues and resolved those issues, which would have been inconsistent with the way that the Crystal Palace board would have wanted to have made. So there would have been a blurring of the lines, which I don't think would have suited the club. And also, it could be that you as fans might say, "Well, hold on, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do," so it could be seen that there could be an element of misrepresentation of key stakeholders in the club, fans, board of directors, sponsors, and so on. And it's actually just easier and cheaper to use the fictional name AFC Richmond. And this is not me having a dig at Palace. Having Crystal Palace's name in it would not have increased the interest in the product, in the TV series, in the major markets such as the US. Because if it had been Chelsea or Manchester United, then you could not understand, and perhaps they would have paid a fortune. Palace don't move the dial as far as American viewers are concerned.
Yeah, I should mention to people listening to this that the next time you're smiling politely at Ted Lasso, remember the actor who plays the character just humiliated his wife in public by serving her with divorce papers in front of TV cameras. And that's the final mention of Ted Lasso. All right, Kieran? No, and And
producer guy, duly note this.
Yeah, duly note this, producer guy, and also producer guy, duly note that that's the last time Kieran says we don't move the dial in America. I'm fed up. I know at least 2 American Palace fans. Jude McCarthy, I beg your pardon, has our next question. And it's a kind of interesting one. It's a sort of thing that people speculate about in pubs. And Jude says, with the increasing number of foreign investors buying English clubs, how much would it take to buy all of the clubs in the Premier League or the English Football League? Who could rustle up the Reddies? Musk, Bezos, Lasso? And if either of them decided to go shopping, how many clubs or leagues could they buy?
Right. I do have a spreadsheet which deals with this particular area. This will come as no surprise.
And you would do if you weren't doing a podcast, Kieran, as well. Let's face it.
Oh yeah. It's been going well before the podcast. Yeah. So the latest valuation figures I have in respect for Premier League clubs, and this is taking into consideration and benchmarking against the Chelsea bid, is that in order to buy clubs in the Premier League, my estimate is £18.5 billion.
Wow.
In order to buy the 24 clubs in the Championship, it would be 1.2 billion. And for the whole of League One and Two, you could probably get it for 300 million. So you add all those figures together, and we're talking around about £20 billion for the whole of the 92 clubs in the Premier League, if you were so inclined, which is substantially less than the cost of buying Twitter. So I think many billionaires could buy it. And again, to put this into context, we like to think as the Premier League as being big, but Microsoft bought Activision, which is the games company. It makes I don't know, Call of Duty and World of Warcraft, or all that type of stuff, and it spent $65 billion on a single computer games company. So that is more than twice, probably about 2.5 times what it would cost them to buy the whole of English football.
Well, that's really interesting as well, and it illustrates something you said right from the start, that the actual brand, for want of a better word, the public knowledge of the Premier League is much higher than the actual money it raises, isn't it?
Yes, it's a small industry with a big voice.
Yeah. I'm hoping that I'm going to pronounce his next name correctly, because it's a really cool name if I pronounce it correctly. If not, it's not. But it's Todd Credieur. Credeur. I like to think that Todd Credieur is some kind of French-Canadian backwoodsman, but possibly not. But it's a cracking name if I've pronounced it correctly. It's also a really interesting question. As Todd says that Ellen Fokkema became the first woman ever to play for a professional men's team in the Dutch 9th tier last year, I think he said. Would it be financially beneficial for a team in the Championship, who pay similar wages to the WSL, to sign a talented female player if she had the skills and physicality to play? The marketing, sponsorships and global recognition could be a game changer if it worked and wasn't seen as just a publicity stunt.
Yes, I contacted a couple of my good buddies on this. First of all, Craig Honeyman, who was on the show recently as an agent, and he says, well, if you take a look at the rules, they do explicitly say this is a men's competition.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
So that would be a potential barrier. Could that be removed? I spoke to one of my friends at the FA, Charlotte, and Charlotte's involved in women in football. And her view was there was nothing that could explicitly stop it. There is the word competitions, and it does refer to Women's Cup and League. And is there specific wording in the men's registration in the men's sport? And there is. Could there be a legal challenge to that? Here we'd have to go. We'd have to speak to some employment lawyers. But under the Employment Equality Act, there is an exemption for sport because it refers to gender effectiveness with regards to physical strength. So it's an interesting one. We just had the Katie Taylor fight last night, which was absolutely fantastic. There is a difference in terms of physicality, but I don't know if there's a women's sprinter who wanted to sprint against the men and she was getting the times, could that go ahead? I don't see any problem. Obviously there would be changing room issues that needed to be addressed, but that's not a big problem. So I think it would be I think it would attract a huge amount of interest, and the club involved and clearly the player involved would be able to leverage on that, especially in terms of sponsorship. So it's I think it's feasible, and the FA presumably, the FA wants to be seen as more progressive than it has been in recent years. I think the FA would have to go along with it. I mean, certainly at kids football, you play mixed football at primary school. So why could this not be continued?
I suppose there will be people listening to this who would see the point about Katie Taylor is that she was fighting another woman rather than a man. But there are sports, and there's one in particular, it's one of my favourite sports, which is horse racing, where women are not only taking part, but they're as good, if not better, than most of their male counterparts, to the extent that ITV quite rightly have now stopped referring to women jockeys as women jockeys. They just refer to jockeys now. But so there is. It's a possible one. But as you say, if it were to happen, the fuss and the potential marketing sponsorship would be fantastic for the club involved, wouldn't it?
Yes, and we know there will be a kickback from a certain part of the population. The game's gone, mate. But if somebody's good enough, that's all that matters. We've got women officials involved in men's football and vice versa, and that works because it's ultimately it's a game of talent, and if you've got the talent in terms of technical, tactical, physicality, then you've got the talent.
Yeah, we could have the irony that we could get a professional woman player in the Premier League before we get a professional gay player in the Premier League, because apparently there aren't any. Jack Wormsley says that the market for retro football shirts has boomed over the last few years, with many companies such as Classic Football Shirts being very successful, and some shirts from the 80s and 90s from the bigger clubs selling for £200 plus. Since the IP rights for these shirts belong to the manufacturer, why don't Adidas, Nike, etc. produce remakes of these shirts to sell now? I understand this may take away the value of the older shirts, but since Adidas, Nike, etc. aren't making any money from these sales anyway, it seems strange they haven't exploited this opportunity. And again, Jack's asked a question that a lot of football fans talk about. We'd all be, well, most of us would be much happier buying modern versions of retro shirts than we would be buying the new shirt with the sponsorship plastered all over the front.
Yes, well, I mean, in answer to Jack's question, there is now such a market, because I think the owners of JD Sports have some sort of arrangement, and you can go. I was at an airport the other day, and I was like, there's some sort of the old school Chelsea shirts when they were sponsored by Commodore, and these were being sold in airports. So there is a market for that sort of that nostalgia market. I don't think that Nike and Adidas want to go down that themselves, purely from a practicality point of view. They are doing huge numbers of production runs for the new shirts. They're selling. If you're Manchester United, you're going to be you're looking to sell hundreds of thousands of shirts a year. And remember, Nike and Adidas are the contracted manufacturers for many clubs. So one of the big costs in the yarn industry is that of setting up your production line. So if anybody's ever worked in clothing, they'll say it's not at the actual cost of manufacturing an individual product. It's the fact that you've got to go and switch from one to the other and change all the mechanics. And for the big companies like Nike and Adidas, it's far more convenient for them to produce an extra 50,000 Manchester United 21-22 shirts than to have to go and say, well, we're going to do every shirt that we've put out over the last 20 years. It simply becomes more expensive for them. And they know that there are plenty of people who just want to buy this year's shirt, and they can effectively force that product. So what we're tending to get is some sort of niche producers. But in any World Cup year, and it is a World Cup year, you will see Umbro bringing out old school classic England shirts, and they sell like hotcakes. We all remember sort of the Gaza shirt and the Gary Lineker shirt, and from 86 and 90 and so on. And they do actually sell in big numbers. And somebody does own the rights to the Admiral brand as well. Right. And that's quite messy because again the sort of that classic 74, 78 shirt that with the sort of the blue and the red across the chest, that was really a fantastic nostalgic shirt for the likes of us. Yeah. Not for Finley, as you can hear. But he's just walked out in disgust. Don't know why he's got it in for that particular shirt.
Well, he's a European dog, Kieran.
Well, that's right. Yeah. He's an English sir.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he should be ashamed.
He's a proud English brute.
Should be ashamed of himself then.
Yeah. So I think it's just a cost issue, but we are seeing more and more of these retro shirts in terms of their value on the second-hand market. Everybody can tell the difference between an original and a new model. Yeah. So it will have no impact upon, because these are seen as rarities. I know a friend that's paid over £1,000 for a shirt of a particular club. He would do so without blinking, because because you're a collector. Yeah, he's never going to wear it.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah,
it just goes into the the vast repertoire, the vast repository that he has, and his very very patient wife Louise just smiles every time he does it.
Yeah, I remember doing a thing on Match of the Day with some Norwegian fans where we flew over from Oslo and. Waiting for them afterwards took some time because one of them, every Liverpool game he goes to, and he goes to every Liverpool home game, he would get a shirt of that match, and he would have the score of the game printed on the shirt in the club shop afterwards with the scorers. And when I said to his friends, "Well, that's dedication," he said, "No, he gets so pissed he can't remember what happened at the game, so he buys a shirt to remind." So I jokingly said, "What does his wife think of that?" He just went, "He's not married." But the other point, Kieran, on that, I suppose if Adidas and Nike were to start making classic shirts from the 80s and 90s, some of the sponsors from those times, like Crown Paints, for example, I believe are still going. So they would be getting free sponsorship as well, wouldn't they? Which again would be nice for them, but would muddy the waters a little bit in terms of recreating these shirts, wouldn't it?
Yes, and you can understand the present sponsors being a bit aggrieved if, especially given that some of the kit manufacturers actually run the mega stores for some of our biggest clubs.
Okay, nice.
So you could see if you were Nike and you were presently running the Chelsea store, for example, you wouldn't want some of the old Commodore. And Umbro shirts because that's effectively giving retail space to a company which you see as a competitor. Yeah, and I appreciate that Nike did actually buy Umbro at one point in time, but so you can see from they are trying to sell the newest products at the highest prices, and they might be a bit aggrieved if we go down that route.
Our next question comes from David Holliday, and again it taps into one of those subjects that football fans are particularly interested in, moan about a lot, and it's a question about ticket pricing, says David Holliday. David says, I was watching Championship highlights recently. I was struck by the number of empty seats at nearly all the 3 o'clock games, in particular Bristol City, my hometown, which had roughly 10,000 spare seats for their game at Barnsley. checking the ticket prices, it seemed like the cheapest was going for £28. Surely it would make sense for the clubs to slash ticket prices and hope to sell more tickets and make more money from drink and merchandise. So where's the crunch point between ticket prices and attendance? It seems like many clubs would rather have a half-full ground of people paying huge ticket prices, and surely the EFL and the sponsors want grounds as full as possible. It's an interesting one, Kieran, because Palace are one of many clubs who, for cup games, for example, in the early rounds, for example, against Hartlepool and Stoke, the ticket prices were roughly half what they were, and the game was sold out for one of them and nearly sold out for the other. So it does seem to make more sense to charge a little bit less and get more people in, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and some form of dynamic pricing, sort of the EasyJet model, potentially does make sense. And you're absolutely right to say for cup matches, which are a one-off, that there is a very good case for reduced prices. And I think, to be fair, a lot of clubs did that, to the extent where I think Liverpool did it a couple of years ago when they were playing at Shrewsbury at home at Anfield. And Klopp said, "Well, actually, I'm going to put out the kids," because he was sulking at the time with the Football Association. And I know that the people at Shrewsbury were actually very upset. They said, "Well, this is costing us money as well, and we are the potential biggest beneficiary of this." I think there's a few things. First of all, there has what we refer to in economics as the price elasticity of demand. And what it says is that if you reduce prices by 10%, then you've got to increase the number of people buying the product by more than 10% to increase overall revenue. So if we take a look at, and I think I might have got the Bristol City and Barnsley home and away the wrong way around here, but I'd had a look. I googled Bristol City versus Barnsley, and up popped a picture of a Massey Ferguson for some strange reason. No idea why. Purely by accident, just as well. The Baroness was looking over my shoulder, saying, "Why can't you be like other men and watch porn? Instead you're watching practice. What's going on with you, Maguire?" But at the home match for Bristol City versus Barnsley, the attendance, or perhaps the pretendance, as they should now be called, because clubs quote the number of tickets sold was 19,897. If we take a look at that, clubs are a little bit coy with regards to the number of season tickets sold, but I estimate that, sort of reading a couple of things about Bristol, they've probably got about 14,000 season tickets. Barnsley would have brought, say, 1,500 to that match, so that's 15,500. So you got around about 4,000 walk-up fans. Now that's at £28 a pop. If you reduce the price by £3, you've reduced the price by 10%. You've got to somehow persuade another 400 people in Bristol to watch a team which at the time had not won a home match for 17 games or something like that. So if clubs are doing well, that is the biggest driver. Trying to actually persuade other people to come along and watch a match is a bit more of a challenge. For Palace versus Hartlepool, for Palace versus Stoke, remember you've got that huge army of season ticket holders who are thinking, well, if they price it right, I'll go along. Yeah. And that's another consideration as far as EFL matches are concerned. If let's say that the average price to watch a match, if you're a Bristol City season ticket holder, works out at £22 a pop, and then all of a sudden the club's saying, "Oh, we're selling tickets for walk-up fans for £15 a pop." You're going, hold on, what's going on here? I've given my money in good faith, not knowing whether the club was going to have a good season or a bad season. And I also gave that, I bought that season ticket in May and June, without even knowing what the player recruitment was going to be. You can see season ticket holders thinking, well, if the club's now going to adopt a policy of selling individual match tickets on a regular basis for lower than what I'm paying as a season ticket holder, and when you work out the price of a season ticket, you say, right, you've got 23 home matches in the EFL, you've got 19 home matches in the Premier League. The chances are I'm going to miss 2 or 3 of them due to crazy kickoff times or other commitments. So you can work out, I'm losing out here to the walk-up fans who who, by definition are not investing as much money as me in the club, and therefore perhaps I might not renew the season ticket because I know, if you're a Bristol City season ticket, you can go to practically every game as a walk up.
Yeah.
The last couple of games at the end of the season, if they're running for promotion or playoffs, might be a bit more difficult. But in general, you've got enough spare capacity there, so it could actually put off a part of the supporter group who are absolutely critical to the cash flows of the club.
To Steve Parrish's credit as well, one of the reasons the tickets for the Hartlepool game were relatively modestly priced was that somebody at Hartlepool pointed out that this was their biggest game for a long time. Thousands of Hartlepool fans wanted to travel, but told Steve Parish what the normal ticket price was in League Two, and how difficult it would be for a lot of them to pay the sort of prices that Palace charged on a weekly basis. So he was quite happy to reduce the price so more Hartlepool fans could come. And in fact, we ended up paying for the travel for away fans at Hartlepool.
Yes, that was brilliant.
Which is a gesture that Hartlepool fans really liked, and so did Palace fans. Our next question comes from Nicholas Mitchum, and it's Mitchum with a U, as in Robert Mitchum, which is handy, because I was talking to a cameraman at Elstree just a couple of weeks ago who told me that his father used to be an electrician at Elstree back in the day, and Robert Mitchum came over to film there and took a liking to his father and wanted to sample working class English life and took a liking to pubs. And it led to about 4 weeks into the shooting of the film, a ring on the doorbell at his father's house, and that his mother answered, and his mother shouting, "Oh my God, it's that bloody Robert Mitchum again." But which made me laugh. It made me laugh. So the idea of this world-weary woman going, "Oh, for God's sake, Ted, Robert Mitchum's here." But Nicholas Mitchum's question is topical, although our waiting list for questions is such this could be from the last time Norwich got relegated, to be perfectly honest. Nicholas says, for a club like Norwich, do they get parachute payments for each year they went down? So payments, for example, from 2017, 18, 21, or just the last time they were relegated. Again, this is one of those technical questions that people ask. It's like, are they still getting the parachute payment from last time they got relegated when they get relegated now?
No, they're not. And this is an area which I think causes quite a bit of beef between the Premier League and the EFL. If you are relegated and you return to the Premier League, all of the unused parachute payments are returned to the Premier League and are split between the 20 clubs. So if we take a look at what's happening this season, it looks like Fulham are up, Bournemouth are up, in effect. They will therefore save the Premier League £66 million in parachute payments in respect of the next 1 or 2 seasons, respectively. That means each individual Premier League club is going to get an extra £3 million on the back of that. And I think the EFL say, and you can understand this, and there is an ongoing. There are ongoing discussions, which discussions is another word for deep disagreements between the Premier League and the EFL. That if they are parachute payments, why can't we have that £66 million and split that between our club? Because we've spoken at length, and also the fan-led review proposals do talk about the anomalies in terms of distribution of monies. So I think this is a bit of an own goal by the Premier League, but. They say it's our money and it's up to us to choose how we distribute it. At present, it is anyway. So if Norwich go down, they do not get the parachute payments from the last time they were relegated, which was in 2020 itself.
Scott Cumming has our next question. Hello, Scott. And Scott is a Scot, by the sound of it, because Scott says, I want to ask a question about my local team, Hamilton Academicals. By the way, I think I should mention to listeners overseas, Kieran, and perhaps to some of our listeners here, that the constant references to tractors, because an MP, a Tory MP, has had to resign after being found watching pornography in the House of Commons. And he says the first time he watched it was an accident because he was researching tractors and accidentally ended up on, as we said, hardcore, eye-watering porn site. And Scott, I'm sorry I interrupted your question to mention that. I'm worried now that Scott's a good chapel goer and be really unhappy that. Anyway, Scott says he's a Hamilton Academicals fan and he attended Aki's games very frequently a few years ago. There's always a good supporter base, decent-sized crowds, and the team always punched above their weight with a competitive squad compared to their playing budget, and a rather natty kit, I have to say. So the club on the face of it seemed to be well run and used resources well to remain competitive. Fast forward to today with dwindling attendances, 3 figures for one recent midweek match, decimated playing squad compared to previous years, and rumours of a takeover from interested parties. So Scott wants to know, Kieran, what is the relative value of Hamilton Accies as a club, and how much would an interested party need to pay to buy it?
Right. I went into the club's accounts, and then I found it had a parent company called Eden Crest Limited. And according to Eden Crest Limited, most recent accounts, and I'm a bit concerned that Hamilton Academical have not published their 2021 accounts yet. They're overdue. And that gets on my naughty step. And because it's the 1st of May today, we're recording, a number of clubs have just joined my naughty step, because they've now exceeded the dates. And Eden Crest value the investment at £552,000, which for a club that is getting only 140 fans, home fans at some matches, seems to me to be a very generous figure. The club doesn't own the stadium; that's rented, and it's costing them £60,000 a year from the figures that I see. So, if somebody wanted to spend half a million pounds on the club, I think actually that would be quite a generous offer. So, yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that the club's on hard times. It's one of those clubs where as a football fan, you grow up with a love of the name.
Yes, absolutely.
Before you even get to know the kit.
Yeah.
But you would certainly be looking for substantially less than £1 million to acquire this club.
Yeah. They do have some great names in Scottish football. They really do. Like, as you say, as a kid, you're just fascinated by Queen of the South. I'm still upset the Third Lanark aren't still playing football. Joe Grant says, I have a recurring conversation with my friends, which makes me assume that Joe Grant's friends are just going, for the love of God, Joe, will you stop going on about this? But Joe says, I have a recurring conversation with my friends and wondered if you could actually shed some factual light on it, which, again, that's the bit that made me laugh, because Joe Grant's friends are going, you're making this up, Joe. You've got no proof of this. But Joe says he's given some background as to why I'm asking and would really appreciate your expertise. Probably less so me taking the mickey out of his question. Joe says, I can understand in principle why Spurs had to curb their spending when they moved to the new stadium. At the same time, though, we posted record profits. So can you shed any light on why building the stadium meant we had less to spend on players? And that's certainly an argument that Arsenal had as well, wasn't it? The first few years they moved into the Emirates, that Wenger's hands were sort of tied behind his back financially, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, and I think it's a fair question, Joe. The reason why Spurs were fairly quiet in the transfer market, and I've gone into the figures in my little spreadsheet this morning, between 2011 and 2016, so we're talking about 6 seasons, Spurs spent a net £8 million in 6 seasons, which is... That is all. Yeah, they're doing that. That included the sale of Bale,
right?
But remember, they famously spaffed it on a bunch of turkeys.
Yeah.
And nearly all of that. But yeah, it's amazing that they spent so little money and yet still were broadly competitive. The reason for this was, Joe's absolutely right. The club was making profits in those years, but as far as the stadium creation is concerned, and the total spending on property assets by Spurs, and this is the stadium and the training facilities and the academy, is £1.3 billion. Spurs were making profits, but the owners didn't want to borrow. They didn't want to go to the position of having a 100% mortgage. And also, nobody would have lent them 100% of the value of their property spent. So therefore, they had to effectively set money aside from the profits they were making to put down as just as we remember the days when we bought a first house. You had to put down 10% or 15% or whatever it was in order to get a mortgage. So Spurs had to put down a significant amount of money because that reduced the amount of borrowings, and also I think more importantly allowed them to borrow at very low interest rates because they were seen to be a low credit risk because they were putting up a large amount of the money themselves. So that's the logic behind that. And what I would say is that since 2016 they've gone instead of 8 million over 6 years, their net spend has been 270 million. So I think the model has worked in that now that they're generating so much more money from the stadium, and their gate receipts have gone from around about 35 to 40 million a season to probably hitting 120 this year. So there are significant advantages, and now they're in a position to be fishing in a different pool when it comes to player recruitment. So it's a case of tightening the belt for a few years to allow themselves to be in a much better, far more sustainable position these days.
Joe's going to be delighted. Joe will be walking in the pub tonight going to see. Kieran Maguire said it was a fair question. So, yeah. Also, Kieran, you remember that last week we had a question from an Australian listener, an expat, who said that he loved being reminded of old English expressions from his childhood, like mugged him off.
Yes.
How excited is he going to be to hear you say spaffed it on a bunch of turkeys? Which I'm just now living for the day when Mika Richards on Sky says, "Well, they've spaffed it on a bunch of turkeys." Ha ha. Chris Chantry has a question. You've got people all over the world now, Kieran, looking for loopholes in the financial fair play rules. And
this is a corker.
It is a cracking one. And Chris may have come up with one here. Chris says, with more clubs using fan tokens, could a club invent fans as a way of putting money into the club and potentially bypass FFP rules? Or could it have been a way for Bill Kenwright to donate the £1 million he offered to Bury FC before being denied by Football League rules?
Yes, there's two ways of circumventing financial fair play: profitability and sustainability, financial sustainability, whatever the suits are going to call them. It's to artificially deflate or post costs elsewhere, and secondly, it's to artificially inflate revenues. So we know that revenues come from TV money. Well, that's easy to check. Because the Sky pay money to the Premier League pay money to the club. So, that's a stated number. In terms of match day income, if your match day income goes from 80 million to 150 million, and you've got the same number of fans and the same season ticket prices, somebody's go, oi, what's going on here then? But when it comes to fan tokens or NFTs in relation to football clubs, because a lot of the transactions are being paid for in Bitcoin, in cryptocurrencies, and because it's all being monitored via blockchain, you have the benefit of anonymity as a buyer. So, is there anything to stop a club having an auction of NFTs, and Liverpool had a recent auction, and the prices for the NFTs going, blimey O'Reilly, I wasn't expecting, I wasn't expecting a picture of our left back, sort of giving a gurning, a smiling face, thumbs up, and there's a cartoon mongoose in the background, which is sort of that adds to the sort of the NFT vibe, and somebody's paid £5 million for that, and I go, well, he's paid it, and how can we prove that's fair value? Because there is no market value because they're unique assets. So yes, I think Chris here has stumbled across, and fair play to you, Chris, has come across a way which would allow clubs to increase their revenues. It's as we've said before, I've got nothing against NFTs at all, in the sense that if they're collectibles, we were talking about people paying huge sums for shirts earlier. And we've all got mates, and we may be guilty of this ourselves as well. Of collecting things. I was talking to a guy earlier this week who owns over 150 cameras. I'm going, well, why don't you just use your phone? But he says, well, you don't understand, Kieran. I said, well, you can't carry 150 cameras. How do you work out which camera? I don't get it. And he's got a collection of typewriters and ancient, old typewriters as well. So it's whatever floats your boat as a collector, and if you get pleasure from that, great, absolutely fine. What I don't like to do is to hear people with the dog whistle, this is an investment. Yeah. If you don't buy this, you're missing out. And I've made millions out of it. You could be a million, because that is all Ponzi scheme. From what I can make out, I think Chris has come up with an absolutely spiffing point here. And I'd imagine, because let's face it, we do know that this show is listened to in a few offices at clubs. People are going, okay, we need to investigate this a bit further.
Well done, Chris. You've got the ultimate accolade of spiffing from Kieran Maguire. Our penultimate question comes from Conor Gallagher. I doubt very much of it. Is that Conor Gallagher?
I was thinking.
He's probably too busy, but it could be somebody who's clever enough to think, well, he's definitely going to read out a question from Conor Gallagher, isn't he? As it happened, I'd have read this question out whoever sent it, but thank you, Conor Gallagher. It's one of those things where it never occurred to me before, but you suddenly go, oh, that's interesting. Because Connor says, how much has the recent success of Juventus increased the value of Torino, which of course is the other team in that fair city? I have to imagine part of the appeal of purchasing Manchester City was it having as a local rival one of the biggest teams in the world. So in the last few years, Juventus have become one of the biggest clubs in the world, which makes me wonder why there haven't been any attempts, at least that I know about, to purchase Torino. It's an interesting one, that, Kieran.
It is. Juventus's current market value, because Juventus are a club which is traded on the stock exchange, is around about 650 million quid, which is perhaps a bit less. It's a quarter of Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's because the Italian TV deal is not as generous. Juventus haven't made as much progress as Chelsea and the Premier League clubs in the Champions League in recent years and so on. There's issues to do with the stadium, but the stadium is better.
It only holds, as we found out recently, it only holds about 44,000, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think I don't know whether Connor is a mischievous Manchester United fan as well, because I think Manchester City fans will be bristling, to put it mildly. To say, the only reason why Mansour bought City is because it's 4 miles from Old Trafford. Again, pal, we need to have a word here. You see other people with the name Gallagher wanting to take him outside and have a word. Should we say, put it quite mildly? But I personally think that ultimately the value of a club is determined by the opportunities to generate cash for that club in its own right. Because you support Palace. Is Palace's value impacted by being in the same city as Spurs, Arsenal, and Chelsea? Palace is South London and proud. And you've got your own identity, you've got your own area. I think it's the same with Torino. There's no evidence that Everton are worth more money because Liverpool are being so successful. So, and if anything, it actually makes it that much more difficult, because if you're in the shadow, in a city of another club, then it's difficult to build up your fan base, because when you're growing up as a kid, there's always a choice. Whereas, if you're growing up in Mansfield, you become a Mansfield fan. In the main, if you because that's the club your mum or your dad or whoever is going to take you along to. So I'm not convinced that it's beneficial for Torino, because ultimately the value of that club is determined by that club's ability to generate money from sponsors and ticket sales and so on. And you've actually got a competitor for that money in your same city.
When my dad, God rest him, was ill a few years ago, he was in hospital for quite some time with a mystery infection, but one of his specialist nurses was from Turin, was a huge football fan, and I was delighted to discover, according to him, that I don't know what the Italian word for plastic is, but real people from Turin support Torino. He told me in no uncertain terms, and if you were from Turin, you didn't support Juventus. He got quite passionate about the fact that he'd, as I pointed out, had ended up supporting the wrong club, which is exactly what I know for a fact. If I'd been born in Turin, I'd be a Torino fan, not Juventus, unfortunately. Our last question comes from Paul Beard, and again, it's a prescient one, and it's a topical one. And Paul Beard says, in the event of a club being brought by a despot who is later overthrown, what effect would that have on the club? For instance, famously, as he says, Gaddafi's child, Nipper, he wanted to buy Palace all those years ago, and then the civil war happened. Where would Palace have stood in regard to the sanctions placed on the Libyan regime and the fact that our owner would have been wanted for crimes against humanity, arrested and subsequently executed? And then the bit that I like is Paul's PS. Obviously, this question was prompted by many hours of pointless bickering with Newcastle fans.
or welcome to Twitter, as it's more commonly known.
Yes. But it's an interesting question, though, because it's one of those things that I've pointed out to many Palace fans who are rightly concerned about the Saudi takeover of Newcastle, that when the rumour was that Gaddafi's eldest child wanted to buy Palace, there were many Palace fans only too willing to turn a blind eye to the fact that he was Colonel Gaddafi's son if he got us into the Champions League. So, we're all hypocrites to an extent. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's a kind of extension of the Abramovich question and the Newcastle issue.
Yes. As far as the clubs are concerned, it's really a case, and it goes back, and I know we harp on about it, is that there are many, many clubs in football who are one owner or one ownership decision away from financial catastrophe. Yeah. If a club had been bought by a despot and that club had been used as a sports washing or a personal executive toy and was incurring substantial losses. And remember, we've said before, Chelsea lost over £900,000 a week for every single week of ownership under Roman Abramovich. That puts the club at financial risk. And the only reason why Chelsea is still going today is the government decided to relax the license, because when it froze its assets, Chelsea were knackered because they would not be in a position to pay the wage bill for March, April, and May. They've had to go back to Abramovich and say, "Will you invest more money in the club?" So a lot would depend upon what would be the nature of the sanctions, and what's happened at Libya. This isn't a geopolitical show, but what has happened at Libya since the fall of Gaddafi, it is very, very unpleasant there at present, because it's effectively being run by a series of warlords, and it's all factional and so on. Then presumably somebody would still have to be the shareholder. Those shares would have to be sold. If it was far more of a forced sale valuation, then there's not going to be a lot of money to go around. And you've got a problem. Whoever comes in to buy the club, they still acquire the legacy contract. So if you've got a load of players who were effectively being overpaid given the club's standalone financial resources, there's a limited pool of people who are willing to take on those losses. But as we've seen with Chelsea, a limited pool still means more than one. So I suspect the club would carry on in all probability. There might have been a reset in terms of its ability to spend money in the markets. And I think one of the things which has, and I genuinely love what I do for a living, is the sense of, there are so many fans who think that the role of a club owner is to spend as much money as possible, to indulge like a spoilt child in a McDonald's. I want to have every single product there, because we need to be the grown-ups in the room as well as other stakeholders in the game.
Tickets are now on sale for the second price of football live on Tuesday, May the 10th at the Wham Stadium, home of Accrington Stanley. It's just a week away, Kieran, isn't it?
It is.
There's a few tickets available, not many, but there are still a few left. It would be lovely to see you. Click on the link in the description of this episode or look at our social media feed to get your ticket now. Thanks to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. And if you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to our always free-to-air pod, go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And of course, if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, folks, thanks so much for the feedback and the support for the show. As far as Patreon is concerned, for as little as £1 a month, you can show some financial support, but you don't have to go down that route. You can, if you want to pop along to your podcast app and give us a review, it helps us in terms of the algorithms. And if you give us 5 stars, it boosts us up the charts, which means that we can attract sponsors for the show. It helps us to book guests as well, because that tends to be the first thing to look at. Who are these people when we start to ask. And it doesn't matter what you say in the reviews. Yesterday I went to Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Brighton, and I was talking to Kevin and producer Guy before. I set off at 6:45 in the morning due to the vagaries of the UK train system. But I was delighted to meet somebody who could say part of the tribe of Burberry apes, and we know what we're talking about here. It's a person who just gone 7:30 in the morning thinks it's cool to be wearing the aquascutum scarf, the Burberry jacket, the flat cap, straight from Peaky Blinders, and he was there with his plastic carrier bag from the local offie and was opening a can of Foster's with his teeth before joining up with his fellow members of the tribe. So I think, I think we need Sir David Attenborough to investigate the Burberry apes in their natural habitat. I think that'd be a fascinating show for the BBC at a time when the licence fee is under pressure. And so you could say you'd rather have the show presented by Sir David Attenborough and Boris Becker. And it wouldn't bother us. It wouldn't bother myself or Kevin. We'd be quite happy. I'd listen to that show. I think it'd be fascinating.
Sadly, Boris Becker is currently unavailable, I'm guessing, unless he's sent to the most open prison you could imagine. What a terrible... I met him a couple of times. What a terrible come down, really. Yes. It's just heartbreaking, isn't it, really? But there you go. So David Attenborough, on the other hand, he would be fantastic. I'd like to. The pod would be twice as long, of course, but it would be worth a listen, wouldn't it? Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.